Let's see. Okay, all right. Bigger pockets. I think we have it here. We are running solo today, so let me try to make sure we get all our connections working and get through any technical issues. Not seeing the comments just yet. Usually, I can see comments here, so hopefully we can get this area. Let's see if that figures it out. No, oh bummer. Can't see comments. All right. So, hey there, everybody on Instagram. Andrew Cushman here, joining you for week 4 of how to buy your first or 10th multifamily property. If you can give me just a second here, trying to get the comments to come up on the Facebook feed. So far, doesn't seem to be working, but hopefully we can get that figured out here. But all right, well, you know what? We will just keep going. So, all right, everybody on Facebook, hopefully you can see the slides. And for everybody on Instagram, we do have slides that unfortunately we can't share on Instagram. But if you go over to the Bigger Pockets Facebook Live page, you will see those slides. And thank you, Joey, I'm going to say this wrong, Soysteam from Florida, just commented on Facebook and confirmed that you actually can comment. So thank you, Joey. I really appreciate that. And actually, Joey, could you let me know, are you seeing the slides? You should be seeing a slide that says 8 steps to buy your first or 10th multifamily property. So if somebody on Facebook could comment and let me know that you're actually seeing those, I'll be greatly appreciated. Again, so everybody, this is Andrew Cushman. For those of you who either missed the first 3 sessions or don't know who I am, I used to be a chemical engineer, went into flipping houses full-time back in 2007. Thank you, Celestina, for confirming you can see the slides. And then in 2011, went into full-time apartment syndication. We've done about 2,100 units since then. All of that syndicated with investors, and that's been in Texas, Georgia, and Florida. And yes, I live in California. The surfboard's not a prop, but my motto is live where you want to live and invest where you can get the best return. So that goes back to one of our previous presentations about how to choose a market. So let's see. Today, we are going to be talking about underwriting. And when I talk about underwriting, we're not going to necessarily walk through any particular underwriting template because, oh yeah, so don't look at the fan. Thank you who are on Instagram. Let me, I'll turn that fan off. Let me do that real quick. All right, there we go. So thank you, and greetings from New Jersey. Oh yes, and when you join, please let us know where you're coming in from. I love to meet people from around the country and around the world. Last time we had someone from Argentina, where I'm going to go visit in about 2 years. Thank you for the hearts on Instagram. Please continue to hit the hearts. Let us know that we are hopefully adding value. So when we say something that's helpful to you, let us know by hitting the hearts, hitting like on Facebook. And also, please share as well. Hello, Gianni from California, and we got Wisconsin in the house. Charleston, South Carolina, great investment market, by the way. And Jennifer on Facebook from Stuart, Florida. All right, we got a good active crowd today. Oh, hey, I gotta give a shout out to House and Epping from London. So I'm probably gonna take the furthest away from today. So if you missed the first 3 episodes of this series that we did, those were how to choose a market, how to build your team in that market, and then how to kind of do an initial screening of properties. Those were all recorded. You can go back and find those on Bigger Pockets. Today, we're going to talk about underwriting. And when we talk about underwriting, what we're talking about is, actually diving into the financials of a deal and figuring out, does this make sense in terms of the returns that you want to get? How much can you pay for it? Is it a good deal, right? The true kind of analysis. And hello, Raquinel from San Antonio. Love Texas. And, if you notice, I'm not going to bring up a particular analyzer or a particular Excel spreadsheet or anything like that. The reason is there's lots of different analyzers that you can use. And we want to talk in terms that are applicable to your underwriting no matter what analyzer that you're using, right? So whether you are using the Bigger Pockets one, whether you developed one yourself, which lots of people do, whether you bought one, there's a handful out there that you can purchase. What we're going to talk about today applies to all of those. So I just want to kind of set the stage for that. So I won't be sharing a dense Excel spreadsheet. And again, hopefully this can apply to everybody. And please go ahead and post your questions. I will pause and get those questions as much as I possibly can. And then if we have time at the end, I'll try to go back and see if there's any that we missed. Hello, Sandy from San Antonio, Texas on Instagram. And we have Michael Henville from the Caribbean. I'm curious, Michael, let us know what island you're on in the Caribbean. So it sounds like a good place to be today. So, all right, let's jump in. All right, quick question for everybody. If you are listening to this and you have analyzed a deal, doesn't mean you necessarily bought or anything like that, but if you've analyzed a deal, where did you get your analyzer tool from? Right? So have you used Bigger Pockets analyzers? Did you build your own? Did you purchase one? If you've analyzed the deal, where did you get your analyzer tool? So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to answer that question. Somebody just asked how long on Instagram, how long is this video? We're probably going to be 45 minutes to an hour total. And again, that'll be recorded. So if you can only stay for part of it, that's fine. You can catch up on the rest of it later on. Hello from Santa Monica, and Michael is on the island of Nevis. I've never been there, but I've heard wonderful things. So, all right, on Instagram, we've got people who are analyzing deals with tools they got from Fortune Builders. I heard a lot of that. Bigger Pockets, again, Bigger Pockets. Arex Real Estate says he made them all himself. Awesome. One benefit of doing that is you understand the mechanics truly of how it works, right? When you build your own, you know how all the cells and formulas are connected and how they relate. And it's really it's easier to understand what's going on. And then also if there's an error, you'll be able to spot it out. So, all right, a bunch more people on Instagram saying they got their analyzers from Bigger Pockets. That's good. Bigger Pocket stuff is solid. On Facebook, Silencio said he purchased his. I'm not sure where he got it, but he did purchase it. All right, we got a whole bunch of people from Bigger Pockets on Instagrams. All right, good deal. So for us, where we got our analyzer is I hired a mentor way back in 2010 to help us learn the business, and he had developed one himself in Excel, and so we started with that, and then over the last 10 years. We've added a lot more functionality to that, and it's grown quite a bit. So ours is homegrown. But again, there's you don't have, if you're not an Excel wizard, don't feel like you have to create it. You can go ahead and use Bigger Pockets, or there's a few decent ones for purchase out there. All right, so analyzing deals, which again that means your actual underwriting. So I like to see the underwriting process really as kind of breaking down into two phases, right? So if you look at I got 5 boxes here. The first one, and for those of you on Instagram who can't see the slides, and if you can't get on the Facebook, well, I'll try to describe it as much as possible. So you'll get 95% of this. The first thing is you identify a deal, and then last week we talked about how to screen those deals. So if you've got 10 deals in your inbox, you don't want to dive deep into all 10 of them. You want to screen them and dive into the few that make the most amount of sense, right? So we screen those. Well, now what do you do with let's say the 2 that look like they have a lot of potential and they actually fit your parameters, right? So, you can spend 12 hours analyzing a deal. You don't want to do that, especially in a market like today's where you got to look at maybe 100 deals to find one good one. So that's why we have underwriting phase 1 and underwriting phase 2. Phase 1 is, think of it as kind of a quick look, right? You're going to, when you're putting numbers into your analyzing spreadsheet or analyzing tool, we got lots more people who say to use the Bigger Pocket spreadsheet, so that's good. Bigger Pockets, you can rely on it being properly done and with the right intentions. So your phase 1 underwriting is where you're going to pull together any documents provided by the seller of the property. So that could be a trailing 12, which is your income and expenses. In a trailing 12, that refers to it shows a year's worth of income and expenses, and it's broken out month by month, right? So 12 months in a row, so you can see what it is each month. You're also going to rely on, if you already own properties in that market, you have an idea of what those expenses might be because you're already operating in that market. You can also talk to property management companies and say, hey, what would you expect this to run for wages or utilities or any of those kind of expenses. So you're using the data you have available, but you're kind of just doing an estimate to try to get an idea without spending too much time on any particular item. And the reason is you're trying to get an idea of what pricing will work for you on that property. Because if someone's asking $1 million for a 5-unit, and you do a quick underwrite, and you find out that, oh, hey, this only works at 600, even with 600,000, even with rosy assumptions, you've already determined it's probably not worth your time to spend on it, right? So, but if they're asking $1 million and you do a quick phase 1 underwriting and you come out at 925,000, you're not too far off, right? So now, and so then it might be worth spending more time and digging in. So that's part of what the phase 1 is. It's kind of a quick and dirty underwrite just to see if it's worth spending more time on the deal. And then also for building broker relationships, right? When brokers send you deal or agents send you deals, brokers and agents get 1,000 emails a day, right? So the way to stand out, and I saw one little heart float up on Instagram. Maybe that's the broker who's listening is like, yes, I get way too many emails. When you analyze the deal, not only is it helping you determine is whether or not it's a good deal for you to probably purchase, but it's giving you a reason to call the broker back and have a conversation with specifics that said, hey, I'm really interested in this deal because of this, this, and this. And could you tell me how old are the roofs and why did utilities go up for 3 months in the summer or whatever it might be, right? Number one, you're building the relationship on the phone or in person, ideally. And then 2, you're showing them that you're a real investor. You took the time to look at the deal and you have legitimate, specific questions, right? You're not just wasting their time. So that's the twofold purpose of this phase 1 is, number 1, quick and dirty. Is this worth your time? And 2, to help you to have good, specific conversations with brokers to show them that you're a real investor and that you are taking whatever they send you seriously, and therefore they're going to take you more seriously, right? Also, in this phase 1 process, you're looking for what are some areas for improvement at the property, right? Maybe you're looking at pictures that were provided, or maybe that you went and took from maybe you toured it. Does the landscaping need improvement? Okay, we're going to spend $10,000 improving landscape, right? You're going to use your best guess or estimate of what that's going to cost. And you go through and you're going to do that with the whole renovation, right? Well, okay. Maybe we're going to spend $6,000 a unit, changing out the flooring and the appliances, right? Again, just kind of a quick, estimate of all these numbers to see if you're even in the ballpark, and then if it's worth digging in further. So, all right, we got lots of intros of people around the country: Las Vegas, Long Island, New York. Also, again, if you have any questions, feel free to post those. I'll try to get to them if I can, as long as my feed doesn't freeze. So, all right, looks like we're okay there. So we'll keep on rolling. All right, so you've done your phase 1 underwriting and you've come out, let's say, hopefully close to what they're asking in terms of price, or maybe you're a little far off, but it's a deal that you really like. You really like the size of it, or the type of the property, or the market, or just it's a deal that you see, hey, this is worth pursuing. So at that point, you go to underwriting phase 2. And Fab Chavs on Instagram says, what % ROI do you consider a good deal? That's going to vary a lot depending on what your financial goals are and whether or not you have investors in the deal outside of yourself. For us, we're generally looking for a 12 to 16% internal rate of return, which is or IRR, or anywhere from a 6 to 10% cash on cash return, meaning whatever, if you put $1 million into, or if you put $100,000 into it, a 6% cash on cash would be $6,000 a year. Or sometimes people talk in terms of what's called equity multiples. So if you put in $100,000 and 5 years later you get $200,000 back out, that's a 2 equity multiple. So generally that's kind of what we're looking for: 12 to 15 or 16 IRR, 6 to maybe 10 cash on cash, and ideally we're going to double the equity in 5 to 7 years. But again, that's largely based on our investor pool and what they're looking for. If you are looking to build a personal long-term rental portfolio, you could have completely different parameters, right? If you're saying, hey, I'm going to buy this fourplex and hang on to it for 30 years, your criteria might be, well, as long as it's in a good neighborhood and a good market and it starts off making $50 a month, then that's good, because by the time you get 20 years down the road, it's probably going to be making a heck of a lot more than $50 a month, right? So Stout Property on Instagram just said, hey, he's shooting for 12%. That's still attainable and reasonable in this market. Glass of Whiskey, love the handle, says, can I watch this in the recording later? Yes, you can. Bigger Pockets is recording this, so you definitely can catch it later. So, all right, good question there, and thank you for a couple of you who posted what you're looking for as well. Certainly appreciate that. All right, so phase 2. This is time to dig deep. And this is when you're going to spend additional time in analysis looking at rental comparables, sales comps, loss to lease. And don't worry, we'll dive into what that actually is in just a couple of minutes. Loss to lease is probably one of the most misunderstood terms out there, but once we go through it, you'll understand it. It's actually pretty simple. So I promise, just give us a few minutes. And then this is when you start getting actual proposals, right? You want to be really careful. Everybody's super busy these days. Everybody's got a lot to do. It's tough for brokers to get listings. It's tough for contractors to get their jobs done. It's not an easy market for anybody, unless you're a seller. Then it's easy for you. But this is where you start getting precise quotes, right? So you did a phase 1. You called the agent or the broker. You talked with them, and you said, hey, you're asking $1 million. I'm coming in at 900. Do you think that's close enough to pursue it further? And maybe the broker said, well, you know what? If you can get it up to 925, I think it's worth putting in an offer, right? So you say, okay, awesome. Let me go back and take a deeper look at this, and I'll call you in 2 days or whatever, right? And so this is where you're going to, talk to your insurance provider and say, hey, I'm looking at this property, at this 20 unit deal in Dallas. It the annual rent is this amount, and there's this many units, and the square footage is this. Could you give me an estimate on what I should plug in for insurance, right? And you're going to get that number. That's when you talk to your lender and you say, hey, just to verify, if we're buying this 20 unit in Dallas, the purchase price is this, and the income is this amount, and our pro forma is this. Is it safe to pencil in 75% to value, loan to value at 3.5% interest rate, and get their feedback, right? So you can kind of dial in your underwriting a little bit, and so that way you can figure out, like, can you get to that, let's say that 925 number that the broker had told you earlier on the phone call. And because what you don't want to do is you don't want to say, oh, sure, I think I can do 925, and it actually gets accepted, and then it turns out you can't, right? Because that's going to blow your reputation, and your reputation is everything. So that's what you're doing. You are diving in deep to find out, hey, can we make this pricing work? So some of the stuff, kind of jumping back to the phase 1, we talked about earlier, hey, don't worry about necessarily whose template you're using. It can be Bigger Pockets, it can be one you purchase. Here's some of the things you're going to want in your template, and you want your template to include while you're doing this, right? So your template should include your, purchase parameters. You're going to input price, amortization of loans, the market, the number of units, rental income, all that kind of stuff is going to you want in there. You need a place to be able to input your revenue, of course. How much are units renting for, and what does that equate to in terms of gross monthly and annual rent. You're going to want to be able to put in all the operating expenses. Some analyzers just kind of have like one or two spaces for operating expenses. I would recommend looking for something that has all of the expenses broken out in as much detail as possible, right? So instead of just utilities, which is okay, it's better if you have electric, natural gas, water, and sewer, right? So ideally, you've got that broken out. You want to have a place for your renovation budget. If you're going to be doing, upgrades to try to increase rents, you want to be able to put that into your template, your underwriting template, so that your template can add that equity requirement into the total cost, and therefore factor that in when it's calculating what your total returns are, right? So you want to be able to factor in your renovation budget. We already talked a little bit about loan terms and equity extraction. So what does equity extraction mean? Well, that means if you do a refinance and pull some money out, right? The Burr method. Brandon and David talk about the Burr method a lot on the podcast. Most of the time, it's in the context of single family houses or duplexes or something. But the beauty is that method works for any size property. We've done the Burr method on 100 and 200 unit apartment complexes. It's one of the best ways to go, because not only does it increase your returns, but it lowers your risk when you take a bunch of that equity out and either put it back in your account or to give it back to your investors. So you want to be, you want to be able to factor in how does a refinance or equity extraction from, again, doing the Burr method, how does that affect the overall returns? And then the output should basically be your pro forma, right? Like, okay, well, if we give it all these inputs, all these expenses, all this revenue, and then we start increasing rents, what do we expect the financials to be over the next 12 months and actually the next few years? So it should spit out a pro forma. So now the next question is, well, where are you getting this information? And most of it's going to come from the seller in one form or fashion. So again, we mentioned the T12, which is the trailing 12. It's a monthly breakdown of the last 12 months of financials. You're going to want to get a current rent roll that has, the unit, the unit number, the type, square footage, rent, deposits, concessions, anything like that. A lot of times, if it's a marketed property, especially if it's commercial, there's going to be an offering memorandum, which is a big package put together by a broker, and you'll have, usually those are pretty thorough, and this will have all of that in there. But also, you're going to want to look for market reports. So, where do you get market reports? Property management companies can provide them. Sometimes brokers can provide them for you. They come out of companies like ALN provides market reports, CoStar. And then also, if you can a lot of the brokerage houses will have these too, right? So if you get on the mailing list for like Marcus and Millichap and Berkadia and Cushman and Wakefield, they put out market reports in many cases every quarter. And you can use those for data. And then the last one, and candidly, often the most important, is your local team, right? So in that, and going back to a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to live in that market. That just means people that you can rely on in that market. So it could be your property management company. You call them, say, hey, we're underwriting this 20-unit deal in East Dallas. In your experience, what should we budget for wages and repairs and maintenance and all those kind of things, right? So that's where you're getting this information. Abariz on Instagram asks, do you recommend buys property out of California? Well, as I mentioned, I live in California, but we don't buy any properties here. Yeah, there's lots of people who've made a ton of money investing in California real estate. I used to flip here, and candidly, I think it's a great market for flipping. Whether or not you buy in California or states like California, high cost states, so New York, places like Portland, Seattle, all these markets, it depends on what your goals are. If you are looking for business friendly environments with a good blend of cash flow and appreciation, then you're probably going to want to look elsewhere for markets like Arizona, Texas, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, large parts of Tennessee. Some parts of Arkansas are doing really well. So again, it depends on what your goals and metrics are. And if you're concerned about whatever area you live, if you're concerned about investing out of state, David Green's book Long Distance Real Estate Investing, it applies those principles that he outlines in there. They're kind of geared towards single family 1 to 4 unit, but the principles apply across the board. So I would say live where you want to live and invest where the returns are the best and meet your goals. So thank you for the question. Appreciate that. All right. So estimating expenses. When you're estimating expenses, you realize that there are some expenses that you have a fair amount of control over, and there's other expenses that you don't have a lot of control over, right? So what are some that you do have some control over? Well, one, admin costs. So that's just like, think of all of the stuff that goes into running an office, and license fees, and fees to the city to have your business license, and then the cost of printing leases, and all of the just administrative expenses that's largely in your control or under the control of your management company. Same thing with wages. You can, you obviously can decide how much you're going to offer to pay staff. With that said, if there's one thing that you don't want to skimp out on, it's wages. Great employees are always, worth their weight in gold, but especially in today's market. And whoever is managing your property, really, that person makes or breaks the performance of that property. And you want to make sure they're getting compensated well. So wages are something that candidly we factor in on the high end of the market to make sure that, number one, if we're bringing in somebody new, we can afford to pay, hopefully the best person in that labor pool. But then if it's somebody that we have, we want to make sure that they're getting really well compensated. So, all right, some things that you have. Oh, a couple other things that you do have control over is, one is advertising. How much you spend on advertising. Again, that's another one that you don't want to go too cheap on. But at the same time, we've seen cases of people spending way too much on advertising. They're not getting a good return on it. So that's you want to test out different modes of advertising work better in different markets. So that's something you want to test, right? Maybe you does posting on Craigslist seem to get enough leads versus maybe using apartments.com or rent.com or any of those, right? So you can maybe test it for a few months, and if it works, great, keep it. If not, maybe switch to something else. But the idea is you have control over advertising, but don't be afraid to spend the money to get the right tenants to your property. Landscaping is another one. Who you hire to do that, the quality of your landscaping, you have some control over that. Some things that you don't tend to have control over is insurance, right? Now you can adjust the cost of your insurance depending on how much of a deductible you choose and all that, but insurance rates are generally something that are set by the carriers and not you. Utilities. Now you might be able to do some energy saving projects, like maybe putting in LED lights or water saving devices. I've seen cases of the utility costs going down anywhere from 10 to 60% by doing that. But other than that, there's generally not a whole lot you can do about utility costs. And same thing with property taxes, right? Usually the county gives you an assessment. You might be able to appeal it and try to get it lowered, but once that process is done, the property taxes are set, and you're on the hook for them. And what you can't control is, you can't necessarily mitigate how much. And Medina 556 says, "I love this." Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I love getting to talk with everybody. We're talking with over 100 people here, which is pretty cool that I can be sitting in my office talking with 100 people at once, all across the country, and a few people from out of the country. So property taxes are something that you don't have direct control over. Again, you can appeal and have some influence on it, but it's not something that you can say, oh, you know what, we're going to cut property taxes in half next year. Good luck doing that, right? And also, when you're choosing your markets, that's something to factor in. Texas is very, very aggressive with property taxes. Again, a great market, but that's a definite downside. Whereas in Georgia, we actually got a tax assessment notice on our annual notice on one of our properties a couple of weeks ago. They lowered our property taxes. We couldn't believe it. Our property taxes actually went down. I think I kind of got the impression they're like, hey, you know, 2020 was a tough year. We'll make it things a little easier on you. I was like, this is one of the reasons we invest in places like Georgia. Business friendly, right? They're not out to get you. It's just kind of a fair operating environment. So, all right, we're getting good questions and comments on Instagram, Facebook. Don't forget to chime in as well. You guys do get to see the slides, so that's one advantage. And let me go ahead and get a sip of coffee and move to the next slide. Brovia 13 says, is there surf in Georgia? No, that's also one of the reasons I don't live there. But there can be if there's a hurricane off the coast, but that comes with other problems. All right, so we're diving into, let's see. Okay, Solandia says, what about Dallas? She's asking that on Instagram. You know, Dallas is definitely a high growth market. Lots of people moving there. Incomes are going up. Jobs are going up. So those are the fundamentals that make for good rental investing. And yes, I would say overall, Dallas in Texas as a state is business friendly. To answer your follow-up question, just be aware that the entire world knows that Dallas and Texas is a great environment, and so it's incredibly competitive there. But if you can get in, then you will have a good tailwind and increase your chances of success. All right, so phase two, this is when you're diving in deeper, you're revising your estimates, right? So in the beginning, you might have said, okay, we're going to spend $6,000 a unit, and yeah, I think we can bump rents $125 if we do that, right? And so you plug that all in, and you come out with a purchase price of $900,000. You called the broker, and the broker said, hey, if you can get to 925, I think it's worth putting in an offer, right? So you don't want to put in an offer that might get accepted if you've just done a quick assumption. Yeah, we can bump rents 125, because then if you end up buying it and that doesn't happen, you're in trouble, right? So this is where you spend the extra time to dive into the rental comps in the area to determine, can you really get that rent increase, right? So that means you're going to, maybe ideally in person, or have somebody do it for you in person, but at least get the data for the nearest competing properties and find out what their rents are. And ideally you can get the actual rents, but especially if you're dealing with smaller properties, 10, 15, 4-unit type properties, probably the best way you're going to find out that information is either just calling, or have someone call and say, hey, if I was going to rent a unit, how much would it be? See what people are advertising for rents on. You can go to realtor.com. There's a handful of sites that Rentometer will kind of give you an average. But if you're making an offer based on getting rent increases, you want to get as specific a data as possible for the properties that are closest to you. The good news is this gets easier as you move up into larger properties, because once you get to stuff that's 50 units and above, there's generally, those properties are included in regular surveys that, you can get all that data. And then Paul Newman on Facebook, just thank you for the reminder, Paul. He posted that Bigger Pockets does have a rent analyzer. So don't forget to go check that out as well. And so basically the point is this is what, no matter how you do it, this is the point at which you really dive into those comps to make sure that you can get that rent increase. This is where you're also going to really look into loss to lease analysis. And I'm actually going to pinch that, just set that aside for just a second, because we're gonna have a slide on just loss to lease analysis in a minute. So we'll dive in deeper at that point. You're going to look at the sales comps too. Now, in today's market, prices for apartments have been going up pretty quickly. So it used to be you want to, if you're looking at sales comps and everything has been trading for a $100,000 a unit, you're kind of trying to maybe get in for 90,000 a unit or something like that. In today's market, in many cases you might be leading the market, right? We closed a deal in March where at the in a smaller market in Florida, where at the time the purchase price per unit that we paid was actually the highest per unit purchase price in that market ever, right? We actually set a new record. And now, granted, it was also pretty new product, so that was part of it, but we set a new pricing record. Well, 6 months later, actually we closed in March. So 3 months later, there are already properties that have traded for well more than that, right? So when you're looking at sales comps, don't get too caught up on, I've got to be the lowest one in the market, because we're in a rapidly appreciating market. So you just want to make sure that, if you're buying a 10 unit property, that all the other 10 units, if they traded for 100 a unit in the last 3 months, you're not paying 150 or 140, right? But if you're paying 105 and it cash flows, that might be okay. A couple of questions here on Instagram. Do you think Indiana is a good market to invest if you live in California? There are some markets in Indiana that seem pretty good. I don't personally invest there, so I can't really speak for it. But again, I have talked to people who are having pretty good success in Indiana. And you said, asked if you live in California, get David Green's Long Distance Real Estate Investing book, and whether it's Indiana or any other state, just pick a market that works for your business building and investing goals. Phase two, again, so this is your revising estimates. So maybe you called the broker and said, hey, I think we can get to 925. This is where you're going to engage your lender and maybe actually get a quote and say, hey, here's the purchase price, here's the property, here's our pro forma. Can you give us a just a soft quote is what's called, right? A soft quote on a loan for this property, and they'll hopefully in a day or whatever they can send it back and say, yeah, we'll give you 75% of the purchase price. This interest rate, this many years of interest only or IO, just all the terms of the loan. They'll give you a soft quote, so you can plug that in, so you can offer with confidence, knowing that you're going to be able to get the loan that makes your numbers work, right? So again, this is when we talked about earlier, you're going to talk with your insurance person. This is when you might say, hey, can you give me an actual soft quote on that, refine that number. You definitely want to have talked to your property managers at this point. So you don't want to get their opinion on salaries, advertising, all that. And again, you've already come up with a number. Now you're refining it. So the property management company, maybe they say, hey, you should budget $1,300 a unit for wages. And then you look, say, okay, I budgeted $1,250 a unit for wages. And then you have the conversation, say, all right, well, I thought it might be $1,250. You're saying $1,300. Could you help me understand why we need, why it should be $1,300, and dive into that. Also, are there any things that you found in the documents provided by the seller that you need clarification, right? So sometimes you'll see, every month there's, landscaping costs $1,600, and then for 2 months it's zero. And then it goes back to, well, I doubt they let the landscaping go for 2 months. What happened there, right? And because if you just use that end of year number, it's going to be too low. Did the water bill spike in August? Was there maybe a big increase in vacancy 1 month, right? You want to find out what caused those things, so that there might be something in there that you need to adjust your underwriting. A couple people have asked. Scott asked on Facebook, and we had a few people ask on Instagram if the PDFs are available. The PDF isn't available, but this whole thing is recorded, so you can just get the recording and then go to whatever spot that has the slide that you want to see, and then you can take notes or do a screenshot or grab that information from the recording. Let me see here. Solandia asked, do you always have property manager? We do. we're a big believer in third-party property management. It has to be the right property management company. But yes, we definitely use third-party property management. And then also a fee calculator. And let me jump to we'll get to a little more specifics on that. Title and escrow fees is what that is referring to. On your initial underwriting, your phase one, you're just going to plug in a percentage, maybe depending on what market you're in, maybe 1.25% or something like that. But different markets have different levels of fees, right? So if, like, for example, if you're buying in Florida, they have what's called stamp taxes and mortgage taxes, and they can add many thousands of dollars to a transaction. We closed a transaction in Florida a few months ago. Just those fees added up to, I believe it was $479,000. So it was about 1% of the transaction price, right? So if you're buying a $1 million 10-unit property, then you need to budget an extra 10 grand just for those fees, right? So, all right. So rent comparables, we talked about diving into those. I just want to go a little more detail on how you actually do that. You want to look at stuff ideally that's within a 2 to 3 mile radius, so not too far away. The location is similar to your property. So if your property is on a busy street and you looked you're looking at another property that's stuck way back in the woods off this no access, you want to factor in that they don't have as good as traffic as you. You want to make sure the size matches, right? If you're looking at a 10 unit, you want to try to look for rental comparables that are roughly the same size. You want to have the same vintage. If your property was built in 1967, you don't want to compare it with something that was built in 2018. That's going to be a completely different class and level of property. So I would say the best thing to do is to stick within 10 years either direction. So if you're buying something that was built in 1980, ideally your rent comps are going to be between 1970 and 1990, right? Again, that's not a hard, fast rule. There may not be a ton of properties nearby that fit that, but if you can get something that is within 10 years either direction, you also want to find something with similar amenities. If you're buying 10 units and it has a dog park and that's it, you don't want to base your rents off of a property nearby that has a pool and playground and dog park and package locker and all this other kind of stuff. You want to make sure the amenities match. How do the interiors at the other properties compare? Do they have quartz or granite or stainless steel appliances and hardwood flooring or plank flooring, or what do they have compared to what you have? Or and what do they have compared with what you're going to do, right? If you've got nasty shag carpet and your rents are $800 and the property across the street has vinyl plank flooring and their rent's $300 higher than yours. Okay, so now if you put in vinyl plank and maybe a few other things, can you get your rents up $300, right? So that's what you're looking at. And then this one's a little bit harder, but you want to compare utilities. And really, the question is are utilities included in rent, right? If someone's charging $800 at one property and then the property across the street's $900, but they include utilities, that property actually might be cheaper because utilities are like, if you're running an air conditioner in Dallas in August and September, that could be pretty expensive. And so that rent that includes utilities actually could be cheaper than the one that looks like it's $100 cheaper across the street. Let me see here. All right. So rent comparables. This is a chart. I know it's a little bit small, even for those of you who can't see it on Facebook. But the point here is to make a quick visual of where your property lies. So on the bottom of the chart, you'll see unit size. So on the left, it says 550 square feet. On the right, it goes up to 800. And then the vertical axis is rent. So what happens is we take the nearby properties and we say, okay, the average square footage is 800 feet and the average rent is 1,400. Boom, that's a dot on the chart, right? And we do that with each property that's a rental comp. And then we plug in the square footage and rent for the property that we're looking at. And that gives you a quick visual. It's called a scatter chart, quick visual of where your property is relative to everything else. And then you can see like, oh, hey, most properties are $100 above us. So if we do some renovations, we should be able to achieve that. And what it'll show you if you do it this way You say, well, hey, this property across the street is getting $100 more than us, but they also have 300 more square feet per unit. So, ooh, okay, we might not be able to match that, right? So this is a really good way to look at rent comparables, is to make a chart. This is just something you can do fairly easily in Excel. Okay, loss to lease. Many of you have probably heard this term. Most of us don't know what it means. I didn't know what it really meant for a long time. Here's what it means. If you have an apartment today and you can lease it for $1,000 a month, but it's currently rented for $800 a month, that means you have a loss to lease of $200 a month. Well, why is that? Well, the reason is the market rent is $1,000, but it's leased for $800. So you have lost $200 a month to that lease, right? So that's what loss to lease means. And it's incredibly important because, and especially in today's market where rents are going up, because it shows you how much upside opportunity there is at a property without doing any physical work, right? So if you're buying 10 units and the average rent is 800, but the two most recent leases were 1,000, then that's a strong indication that you can just take those other 8 units, and when they come up for renewal, you can bump the rent $200, and therefore that loss to lease of $200 becomes a profit to you, right? So that's what loss to lease is. That's how to look at it. This chart here, we basically did the same thing like that we did with the rent comps. We take the leases for a property and we just plot them on a chart, and we say, okay, the most recent ones, where are they, and can we get all the other ones up to that level, right? That's our favorite upside opportunity, because it's the easiest, the fastest, and the most profitable, is loss to lease. So that is definitely something you want to make sure you're out looking for. Sales comparables. Basically, you're just saying, how does the price per unit compare with other properties that have sold recently? Brokers can get you this data. Property managers sometimes can get it. There's a variety of services that you can subscribe to, but again, brokers are one of the best. There's also a service called Reonomy, Reonomy, that not only provides owner information, but will tell you how much properties have traded for. And we have a question on Instagram. Says, do you ever stop yourself from raising rents on single family houses if the tenant is great? Sometimes, yes, because if you've got a tenant that really, and this applies to small apartments as well, if you've got tenants that take good care of the property, don't cause damage, don't take too much time from you and your staff, it's probably worth it to let them have a slight discount, because they are saving the value of your time and energy and the cost of repairs. And also, even if you have 2 weeks of vacancy while you turn a unit and move somebody else in, if that unit rents for $1,000, that's $500 lost, right? So I definitely wouldn't let it go too far, but there is something to consider for having really good tenants and kind of essentially rewarding them by letting them be a little bit below market. So good question. And sometimes we'll find entire apartment complexes where the owners approach that with all 50 units, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So, all right. So again, just a quick recap. You've looked at rent comps, loss to lease, sales comps, and if you're negotiating an offer and you're diving in deep, you're going to want to get an actual soft debt quote, a soft insurance quote. You want to talk to your property managers, get their opinion of the property and what it should run, what kind of expense levels and income levels it should run at. You want to make sure you get your questions answered from the trailing 12, the financials of the property, as well as the rent roll. And you want to make sure you've estimated your fees as well. So speaking of the fees, there's a title fee calculator that you can use. It's basically First American title, but on Facebook you can see the slide, and then Instagram, everybody, it's FACC firstam.com, and you can pick your market in your area and plug in your transaction information, and it will give you an estimate of what your title and escrow fees should be. This is a super valuable tool, especially if you're looking at different markets. So again, this is a free resource that you can use to estimate that piece of it. And again, depending on your market, that can be a very significant piece. So, all right, we're gonna be wrapping up here in just a few minutes. It's already been 50 minutes. Can't believe how quickly the time has gone by. So if you're holding on to any questions that you just haven't had a chance to get out, please go ahead and put them in. I'll try to jump in and get those either on Facebook or Instagram. So Paul says, nice free resource. Thanks. You're welcome. Again, we find this super valuable in our business. So, all right, just quick recap. Analyzing deals. We talked about underwriting phase 1, underwriting phase 2, where you take a lot of extra time and you dive in deep. What happens after that? Now it starts to get really exciting. The next thing we're talking about next week is writing your letter of intent and your purchase and sale agreement. And let's see, glass of whiskey. You just you posted on Instagram facc.firstam. Yes, you're exactly right. Just add .com to that, and you'll have the website. So, and all right, big pile of hearts floating up. So thank you, I appreciate that. So yes, so next week we'll be going through. This is where it gets really exciting. You're writing offers, right? So you've picked a market, you've put a team together, you've been getting deal flow and leads coming in, you've been screening them, you've been identifying the ones with the most potential, you've taken those couple that have the most potential, you've done some underwriting, you've talked to the broker or the agent, or even if you're going direct to seller, and you've realized, hey, we're close enough. We're going to put in an offer and see if we can get this thing under contract or an offer accepted. That's when you do your LOI, which is letter of intent, or purchase and sale agreement, or PSA. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. Is at what point do you do that? What do you say? What do you not say? How do you structure those? Do you get an attorney? Do you not get an attorney? How does that whole process work, right? Let me see here. We've got a few questions all piling in, and let me make sure I get. All right, Elijah on Facebook says, I'm talking to my father about buying a few single-family homes as an investment. He says to wait for the market to crash. What is your position on this matter? You know what, Elijah? There's been a lot of people who've been waiting for the last 10 years for the market to crash, and they are so far behind. They're probably never going to recover. Best time to buy real estate was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So, really what I like to say is don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. So as long as you buy a property, whether a single family or a multifamily, that cash flows and is in a good market, if you hold it long enough, you will eventually win. That's one of the most incredible things about real estate is, if you buy a stock, that company can go bankrupt and disappear, right? And your investment can go to zero and then it'll never come back. With real estate, as long as you don't lose it, meaning as long as you can pay the mortgage and the expenses, over time that mortgage balance gets paid down. And even if prices come down in the United States for the last 100+ years, they always eventually start coming back up. So if you buy it and you have the ability to hold long enough, you will do well. Also, it seems like we are hitting a period of inflation. I mean, it's definitely here now. Who knows how long it's going to last, but it's definitely here now. When we are in periods of inflation, one of the things that typically benefits the most is real estate, right? Rents tend to go up, which means your income tends to go up, and then the value of the property itself tends to go up, whether you're talking about a single family rental or an apartment complex. So, waiting for the market to crash, to me, the answer is absolutely not, because you could be waiting for the rest of your life. Not to say there may not be a dip or two along the way, but a crash, there's just too much of a housing shortage to see there's going to be a crash right now. If interest rates double in 2 months, okay, that might cause a problem, but I don't think the Fed's going to allow that to happen. So the moral of the story is don't wait, just make sure you buy the right property in the right market. But that's a great question. Thank you, Elijah, for volunteering that and jumping in there and posting that. Let me see here. We had a few more questions. I got just another minute or two. Let me see if I can grab one of those. We got lots of comments in here. All right. Let's see. Thank you, sir. You are welcome. Let me see. Andy says, so your property management not limited to that all phases sale investment. So we use third-party property management, and once you bring them on, they will assist, of course, with managing the property, and then also making sure it runs well until you sell it. But also, a good management company will be your partner in doing due diligence and underwriting properties, helping you get the information to make a right investment decision. So, all right, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. Again, we'll see you next Wednesday, same time. We're going to be talking about putting in those offers and how you make your offer one that's hopefully going to get accepted and stand out from the other 37 offers that the seller is probably going to get. If you'd like to connect with me, our website is right here on Facebook. But if you just Google Vantage Point Acquisitions, that should be the top result, but it's vpacq.com. Feel free to reach out and connect with me on Bigger Pockets or through the website. In the meantime, go out and underwrite some deals. Get it. If you don't have a calculator, go to Bigger Pockets, download one, put it to use, look at some deals. And you know what? If you come back next week and say, "Hey, I analyzed the deal," after the webinar last week, and have some questions, bring those questions back and we can talk about them, and then and wrap that into, how would that factor into an LOI or purchase and sale agreement. So let's see, we got Paul, Sherry, and Jennifer on Facebook. All say thank you for all the great information. I really appreciate that. You're welcome. I enjoy sharing with you. Hopefully I will see you next week, and everybody take care.